Hi, and welcome to another Type with me. In this episode, I'm going to talk about void default export and why you should avoid default export, right? We will go over some examples and I will show you what the disadvantages are of using that. So I have here an empty project, right, where we're going to start from, and I'm going to create here a new file called foo.ts, right? And in here I'm going to create a class called foo, and I'm going to do an export default of foo, right? Of course I need to create it correctly. So here we are, right? And now I'm just going to import it. So I'm going to import foo from /foo.ts, right? What I'm going to do here, just to have a little bit in here, I'm going to say bar, which is a function, and that function will return bar, right? Okay, so now here I can do something like console.log, and here I do new foo.bar, right, which is correctly. Of course I do save here, and now I can do dyno run index.ts, right? It checks the index.ts and it just prints out bar, right? But this is very easy, right? So I want to change here foo in something else. I do loo here, and also here I do loo. Well, then you will see that we don't get any notifications right here. So if I just rerun it, you'll see that it still works, right? But it's a little bit strange because you changed the name of your class, right? But yeah, it doesn't reflect through your whole application. And then you can say, okay, that's nice, but yeah, you made a change of the name of the class for a reason, right? You made it for a reason, so why is it not complaining about it? So imagine that we are doing the same. We are doing it here foo, and then we are doing it here with foo, and then we do just export. You can just very easily do it here, export, right? Just save it. And of course here you will say that we have a problem, so we will do it like this then. Okay, so here again I run it, you'll see we get still bar. When I now change it to loo, you will see that we get an error right here. If I try to run this, you will see that it's not possible, right? So that's something very important to know, that even when you change your default, that yeah, you have some problems when you rename your class names, for example. So when you just have one export default, it's maybe not that of a big problem. But if you have, for example, a class loo, and then you have export, and then you have a class foo, right? And then, for example, we take it here, we put it here, right? And we say foo bar, then we do here export default foo, right? Well, if you then want to refactor something, it's very hard to do so, right? So okay, we have here now this, right? But we can do then something like loo, and here of course we need to do then loo. But imagine I don't want that and I want foo. Well, then I can just do an import, but I don't know if it has a default input. It doesn't have any intelligence, right? So you don't know really if it has a default export. So that's also something that's very hard. And if you then create code for your coworker, well, he has a hard time. He really needs to go to that file. He needs to see, okay, I have a default here, and then he knows that he can use that. So that's also a reason why I should say, okay, it's bad because it has poor discoverability, right? So that's another one that's maybe interesting to know and to take into account when working with the export defaults. So here I have an autocomplete. So what I could do is I could just move this. I can do control space, and then I see that I have Lou here, right? And that it's a class. So for that also it's very easy to have auto-completion. What is in that class for other developers? By default you don't have it there, so that's also a reason why you need to avoid that, right? So another one is for CommonJS. So in CommonJS you can do something like const and then get the default out of it by this syntax, and then you can do something like const Lou when you have the real name out of it. So if you don't care that you just want to export something and that the name doesn't matter anymore, yeah, you could eventually say, okay, I want to export something default. When you say, okay, I want to export multiple things, then I really recommend you to just do this and definitely avoid export default. But in most cases, it's not good. And you need to know that, for example, with CommonJS, you have this kind of syntax, right? So that's that. Also, when you want to export your default, for example, within an index.ts, because you are building a module where you want to export different things, you need to do it like this. TS, right? You can do it like this. It's also much harder to do so because then you have default and you need to stick with the name there. It's very easy to make typos. So when you want to export something explicitly, you can do export Lou from So you can do it like this. This is much cleaner and easier to do so, right? So yeah, like I said, when somebody does this, right, he can do so. It's easy to make typos there and to have some kind of issues when you want to refactor and want to structure code much better. In my opinion, the auto-completion is very important, definitely when you are writing TypeScript applications. So for that, I would say use it properly and also use just the export instead of the export default, right? So another thing that I just want to mention is when you want to use default imports, you could do something like this, right? So you could have high charts, and then you could have this input just to the code here, right? And then of course you have high charts.default.chart, which is a little bit strange, right? Why do we have to do .default. So it's much nicer when you are not using that, and so you need to know that here we don't have .default here. So that's why I say here notice .default. So here we just have no .default. So it's much cleaner when you just export your TypeScript library to the offsite URL as well. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand why you need to avoid defaults. The only thing that I say it's maybe applicable is when you have just here foo.ts where you have one thing in that file and you just want to export it, and it doesn't make any sense what the end user makes of that name, well, then you could maybe say, okay, I just do an export default, and maybe more with functions or with a constant, where you have just one thing in that file. Otherwise, I would say try to avoid as much as possible and just export the whole things that you want, because you get a lot of other advantages when you are just not using the export default, but just the standard export, right? So I thank you very much to listen to me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. Please subscribe to my channel. Give it a thumbs up when you like it, and see you next time. Bye.